You know, one of the saddest parts of this whole living in America thing is that because this country and the world are in turmoil, fewer people will find it reasonable to pay attention to American politics. First, those who do will end up wanting to repeat the same decisions and ideas that gave us these problems in the first place, and a lot of these issues are basically invented out of thin air, like a surprising amount of them are, at least in my opinion. And a lot of people will take one look at what's going on and they'll be like, "No, I'm not even going to get involved in that." And to some extent you can't even blame them. I mean, things are just getting so crazy. They won't necessarily think of and fight for the concept of peace and find a peace candidate because well over half the time there is none. And I know it sounds contradictory to fight for peace, but to some degree, as contradictory and as absurd as it sounds, there is some truth to that. Fighting does not always mean like violence, like shooting people or that kind of thing. It can mean just taking a stand for what's right. I think it's also just easier for a lot of people to just absorb and cling to status quo values. Then some people disaffected by the system will discover rotten, often right wing candidates on top of that, and they'll think these people have appeal as defenders of freedom, and it's usually going to be some highly warped version of freedom, of course, when it's not clear that they're campaigning or voting for something terrible. You know, they're very easily duping people. They're leaving the door open for a candidate who will only bring so-called peace and prosperity if we adopt terrible ideas that favor the ultra-rich and the military-industrial complex at all costs. If this makes me wonder anything, it makes me wonder if anyone is smart enough to even do better than this. But, I do look at the way some other countries do things, and it does give me some hope. Like, not every place is this bad off. Sure, they might have their problems, but some place like Finland, for example, they seem to actually have their shit together to some degree. And I really wish more countries like the United States would start following their example a little bit more. And I think there has to be a way to let people know they're stupid without outright calling them stupid. It's like that quote sometimes attributed to Winston Churchill. He allegedly said, "Tact is the ability to tell someone to go to hell in such a way that they look forward to the trip." So that might be an authentic quote, I'm not sure. You know how things go. A lot of people end up with these quotes attributed to them that they might not have even said. Anyway, mostly I'm just thinking we're so far removed from the time of the civil rights movement, and frankly just so far removed from a time when we actually believed our country could be a force for good in the world, that we should understand that this country cannot hold the gold standard of peace. At best, I think we can just minimize some of the damage and, maybe prevent further atrocities from happening. I think someday we could actually be a bigger difference maker, but that day has not arrived yet. So when I say I understand the anger people feel at aspects of American domestic and foreign policy, I mean it. I do understand it. There are occasional glimmers of hope, though, even from within the system itself, and I sometimes forget to actually think about that, but, there are some halfway decent things that happened. Just one example is Congresswoman Barbara Lee, and if you look at her record, it's not all bad. She applauded the resignation of CIA Director George Tenet, for example. And what made him so bad was George Tenet had told George W. Bush that the presence of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq was a slam dunk case. Congresswoman Barbara Lee was also the only member of Congress to vote against the authorization of the use of force against Iraq in 2001, among other things. So, occasionally even these politicians, they actually do make a positive difference, and they're capable of making a bold choice. That decision did not make her popular. So I have to say, if only there were more people like her, I think we could get things done. But I think a lot of, the so-called progressive politicians who end up there in actual positions of power, I think they end up just sort of tweeting or whatever. Like, that's mostly what they do, instead of actually, effectively creating policies that actually make a difference. But until there are more people, who actually get stuff done, I think we're going to have to do our best to wake others up. And it's going to be hard because a lot of people are pretty well, they're locked into this bullshit, this crazy understanding of how things are supposed to be. So yes, sometimes I devote this little podcast to entertainment stuff, fluff type of content, but I also will occasionally talk about stuff like this. I think it doesn't need to be an either or equation. So anyway, let me know what you think. Have a good day.